Hi class, welcome to Disciple Making and Church Planting in North America. This is the course code MI304 here at Piedmont, and just want to welcome you to what is the first lecture of this course, and really kind of sets the foundation for the course and lets you know why we have this course in the program, why it is essential to the North American church planting minor as a whole, but also how it actually helps, I think, every area of ministry, because we're talking about making disciples. And so the main focus of this class will be on discipleship, making disciples, but we are going to always kind of couch it and see how it can relate to church planting, church revitalization, and church health. And so with those three focuses, we're really looking at helping really every church. So no matter what position you have, or no matter what church you become a part of, or even style or model, or whether you're helping a church plant or you're at a 200-year-old church trying to help them get back on track with making disciples and seeing lost people saved, this class can help you. So whether you're in youth ministry, children's ministry, studying business, it doesn't really matter. This course, I think, is essential for every Christian. And so many of you in this class may not aspire to plant churches, but you've taken this course because you have a desire to learn how to make disciples better. And so I'll be sharing some personal things that I've learned along the way. My disciple making journey is not one that I'm proud of, in the sense that I was really never truly discipled. It was kind of assumed if I was in a Sunday school class in that youth group and going to church, then I was discipled, right? Even reading my Bible on my own, but never really had someone really step alongside and walk alongside with me to teach me how to not just study the Bible and pray, which are essential things, not just how to go to church and to volunteer, but also how to make more disciples. The discipleship process is never really complete. You're always growing, but you can never really say you're getting to a healthy spot until the person you're discipling is able to disciple others. And that's the part, the discipling others, that I never learned that was essential to me being a disciple. We're going to later in this class actually define disciple and talk about some of those things a little more in depth. But for this lecture, we want to just lay a foundation, because we want to really focus on disciple making, church planting in North America, the three kind of key phrases there in the course name. And so we're going to talk a little more about church planting in this class in some specific ways, but there's another course, MI305, that is all about planting churches in North America. It's the follow-up to this particular course. It goes into the nuts and bolts of church planting. Here we just want to relate our disciple-making efforts to things like church planting, but also emphasize church revitalization and church health or church growth. So this is the first of three lectures that you want to have that really focus on kind of laying the foundation. I call it the missional foundations lectures. There's three of them. We're going to study in this particular lecture why this focus on disciple making and church planting for North America. The next lecture we'll talk about what is Jesus' desire, what is his heart, and then we're going to talk about just the Great Commission in general. And from that Great Commission lecture, we kind of branch down into the nitty-gritty, the details of disciple making. And so today, this lecture, we want to just answer the question, why plant more churches in North America? So let's just dive in. Here's a great quote, one that's very, very popular if you study missions and missiology. Peter Wagner, well-read, respected missiologist, stated years ago in a book, I can't remember which book, but he said that planting new churches is the most effective evangelistic methodology known under heaven. I'm actually a church planter. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I am here to help start new churches, and we are seeing that the way this quote I really think is true, because we're not just trying to get new churches started. That's not our main goal. Our focus is not to get a new church started. Our focus is to see lost people saved and become disciples who disciple others. And so, but the fact that we're planting a new church is helping us do that in a lot different, more robust. It's actually helping us in the fact that we're planting a new church. And so we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We believe we make disciples and they become the church. But with this emphasis on us starting a new church, we have to be making disciples. So there's inverse relationship in there. They're intertwined. You can't separate the two. But he said planting a church is the most effective evangelistic method. Now, that's key to note. because I've had several in this class, myself included, years ago when I first started exploring church planting, wondering if God was calling me to that. I really thought that the end goal was to get a new church started, and for me, it was to have the cool new church everyone wanted to come to, all the Christians, right? I didn't care about lost people as much. I just wanted all the Christians to come, have a lot of people come hear me preach. That was my really, really, really bad idea of church planting years ago. God has redeemed that, got rid of that, and brought a lot of people into my life who helped me understand what it is. But church planting is actually a method. It's an evangelistic method. And I think sometimes we fail to realize that. We think it's the end goal. Planting a new church is not the end goal. A new church start is not the end goal. Disciples made is the end goal. Because what we're going to see here as we go through, the natural byproduct of making disciples is new churches are going to be started. You have a pocket of lost people. You have 50 lost people who become Christians. Well, then they got to do something. So you can either join churches, or if you're in a context like mine where there are very few Christian churches, then they can form their own new church. So this is a very key quote. Please jot that down and know who said this quote. Is church planting good? This is a question that I've heard debated on both ends. Is church planting a healthy thing? There seems to be this last 15, maybe 20 years, a really big emphasis on church planting. These church planting conferences have sprung up, books, seminars, all these things. It seems like everyone is talking about church planting. That's starting to die down a little bit. I think that's a good thing, because we're starting to focus on things like city renewal and how church planting fits into that, and cultural engagement, how church planting fits into that. But I've heard some say, well, especially depending on where you live. I grew up in North Carolina until I moved here to Canada, and so there was a church on every corner. I can almost throw a rock into the parking lot of a church right nearby, and not even, let's see, half a mile down the road is another church, and another half mile another church. And so my community was filled with church buildings. That's a key distinguish. But you can have a pastor, and I've talked to these pastors. We actually had a student who was in this course. He's already graduated from Piedmont, whose father was a pastor in a southeast U.S. state, and essentially his dad really didn't see the purpose of starting a new church, because it was a competition thing. If you have a new church get started down the street, then all of our people may go there because they offer something better, cooler, whatever. And so there was this fear. And so this guy's father really thought that church planting was a bad thing for North America. We do that overseas. We don't do it in the U.S. or in Canada. Well, this student kind of brought that mentality to school, but we started sitting down and talking, and it was actually during a chapel sermon where he heard someone else speak who was a church planter just talk about it's a focus on seeing lost people saved, nothing else. And so it really changed, and he actually switched his minor, started taking this North American church planting minor, and is now involved in the work. So you can go both ways as far as what you hear today. I don't know what your personal thoughts are. You may be taking this course because you're curious, but I'm going to say, is church planting good? I'm going to say yes, it is, because of these 4 reasons. Statistically, new churches have more baptisms than established churches, and it's not a competition. We want established churches that are 50, 100, 150 years old, still to be baptizing people on a regular basis. We want all churches, no matter their age, size, or anything, to be baptizing people, because if that means that they're baptizing people, that means lost persons have become believers and are hopefully being discipled. And the baptism is kind of like that public step to work into, to start in their discipleship. And so, but statistically, you look at the numbers, new churches have more baptisms per year than established churches do. And a lot of that, it really is due because when you're planting a new church like we are now, we have to see lost people saved. We have to be doing evangelism. Right now, my job is, as a church planter, we're still in our first year. We're in year 1. And my job really isn't the counseling and shepherding type things that a lot of pastors have. I don't have an office. I'm sitting in my home in our spare bedroom, which is my office. I don't have an office I go to. I don't have a staff that I'm coordinating. I spend the majority of my time with lost people, sharing the gospel, building relationships. I was with 2 yesterday. And so, as you're starting a new church, you have to be doing evangelism. And so that is why there is an increase in a higher percentage of baptisms in new churches than established, because we have to be doing that and we have more time. Now, as the church becomes established, there are other ministries and programs and things that are happening that kind of take away some of the attention, sadly, on evangelism. And so, what I want to argue for in this course, you want to hear me say this throughout the course, is that no matter what size your church is, or what kind of church you have, or how old it is, or anything, we should always be focused on making disciples, which is both evangelism and discipleship, is both of them together. But statistically, new churches have more baptism than established. So I think church planting is good for that reason. Is church planting good? Well, new churches actually do grow at a faster rate initially. Now that does wane off. It's kind of like a kind of graph, you would say, but you start off really high, and we go up, and then it kind of maybe plateaus and sometimes declines. The challenge, though, is when you start to get to that plateau, how to break out and keep growing, which I think things in this course could help the church that's stuck in that plateau, instead of going down and declining, which leads to a dying church, which has to shut its doors, sadly. How can we, no matter what their age is when they're plateauing, how can they reinvigorate and keep going? But a new church, statistically, newer churches do grow at a faster rate, and we want to see that growth be from baptisms, not just from Christians coming over. That's going to happen, but we're not. We want to see it more from lost people becoming saved. Is church planting good? I would say yes, because it can bring new life to a declining church. We have church partners, those that are supporting us financially, that are plateaued, maybe even declining a little bit. But for them, there's been they're kind of reinvigorated. We've had several come on mission weeks, brought their mission teams with us. They get to do evangelism in a post-Christian city where people really don't know a lot about Jesus, and it kind of has brought some new life to them. They get to support a missionary that they know. They get to send teams. They get to, we send them updates and all sorts of things. And so and if the church is even planting in its neighborhood, like what if an established church 100 years old helped plant a church right down the street and say, we don't care if we lose some of our people, because it's about God's kingdom, not about our own kingdom. And so, but I think church planting actually can bring new life to a declining church as they get involved and they see the results of their labor. And I also think that church planting is good because I think it's the best strategy. Remember, Peter Ryder says the most effective evangelistic method or strategy. And I think church planting is the best strategy for gospel saturation. We'll talk more about gospel saturation and define that in the next lecture video. But I think it's the best strategy for that because, remember, it's a method. Not the end goal, it's the method. Church planting is not specifically commanded in the Bible, but it is a natural byproduct of the Great Commission to make disciples. You can plant a church and never get disciples. But if you make disciples, you'll always get a church. And so if we focus on what Jesus said to do, which was go and make disciples of all nations, that was the command. And he said, love God, love others, the great commandment, yes. But he also gave the Great Commission. He didn't say go plant churches. We've looked at the book of Acts. What happened? Churches were being started throughout the world because it is the natural byproduct of just simply making disciples. That's why we're going to focus. What do we mean by church planting? This gets in a little more of a definition of and kind of understanding church planting, but you'll see the disciple-making component really intertwine. There's kind of two ways that we express church planting. You hear that word church planting. It's more of a botanical type analogy. We plant new churches. We take this little seedling, and maybe it's a core group of 20 people, and we plant them in a community, and they sow the gospel, and they water the gospel, water with scripture, water with prayer. The Holy Spirit's working, and this little tree, this little plant starts to grow, and this church starts to grow, and it has 10 people, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then what happens? It's supposed to multiply, because any kind of fruit tree, any kind of tree has some type of fruit that helps reproduce another tree. And so we have both this botanical and we have a human analogy. We're talking about birthing new churches. There are some textbooks you can pick up where they actually kind of walk through the phases of planting a church, and it's the conception phase, the prenatal phase, the birthing phase, the toddler phase, the adolescent phase, the young adult, and then adult. I mean, they have all these different phases, but they relate to starting the church, getting it growing, establishing different ministries and things, training new leaders, and then as it keeps growing, gets to a point where one of those leaders is sent out to help plant a new church. That's that fruit that is dropping off the tree and helping plant something else. It's that son or daughter church that is going out and starting a new one. So we have these two analogies that are quite often used, and so I just wanted to take this slide to explain that. But churches were made to reproduce after their kind, just like people and animals and plants. Well, churches were made to reproduce after their kind as well. Here's a definition of church planting. It's the simplest one. That's the one I like the best. And you'll see why it's so important for this class. J.D. Payne defines church planting as disciple making that results in new churches. Love that definition. You can have a lot longer of a definition, but I think this one is the best. And jot this one down. Yes, it will show up on a quiz, exam, so forth. But church planting is disciple making that results in new churches. This is why we're having a whole class focused on disciple making, because it is the key part of defining what it means to plant churches. Because if you're, like I said, if you're making disciples, the byproduct naturally is going to be new churches. So church planting, by definition, is disciple making that results. As you're doing that, what you see happen is new churches. Biblical church planting is about using contextualized methods in a strategic manner to reach unbelievers, teach them to obey Jesus, equip them as church leaders, and send them as disciple makers and church planters throughout the world. This is my longer definition, kind of a compilation of a lot. Now, you'll see there's a lot of words in here, but biblical church planting is about using contextualized methods. Now, we actually have a whole other class on contextualization. If you're in the North American Church Planting minor, you will take that class. It's required. If not, it may just pique your interest. But in the contextualization class, it's asking the question, what does the gospel need to look like here? What is the best way to communicate, to share, to show the gospel in this particular context where I am? So I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It is not Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I used to live and even work there at Piedmont. It's a different culture. It's a different geography. We have minus 30, minus 40 temperatures here on a regular basis in the wintertime. Did not have that in North Carolina. That actually changes how people interact with each other during the wintertime. So a lot of different things that factor in, but contextualization is all about saying what's the best way to share the gospel, what's the best way to contextualize or to help it to fit this particular area. But it's using these contextualized methods in a strategic manner to reach unbelievers, share the gospel with them, then lead them to Christ, teach them to obey Jesus, everything he commanded, including make disciples, equip them as church leaders. You don't want them just sitting there on the sidelines. You want them to be equipped, Ephesians 4:12, and sent. Send them out as disciple makers in their community, at their work, but also all around the world. So that is my longer definition of church planting. You won't have to write the whole thing on a test, but you might have to fill in the blank. So why I focus on North America? Now, when we talk about North America, some maps or some categorize North America as the continent that includes Canada, the U.S., and often Mexico and Central America. But for the purpose of this class, we're really only going to focus geographically on the U.S. and Canada. Church planting and missions to places like Mexico, Guatemala, Panama, some of the Central American, that's not their own continent, usually lumped with the North American continent, but that really does require a more international missions approach, which we have a whole other degree program and classes for focusing on that, mainly because of the linguistic and cultural differences. So for this class, we'll talk about mainly the U.S. and Canada, the predominantly English speaking. Culturally, North America has this Western worldview. And the West is often compared to the East or to others, where a Western worldview isn't just because we're on the west side of the hemisphere, because a lot of Europe and even some Asian nations like Japan and South Korea are actually probably more considered Western in some ways. Not all, but anyway, so we have this kind of Western worldview that for the last 200-300 years has really been viewed as sadly is more of a colonial mindset where we try to take over things. The British Empire was taking over a lot of the from India and Africa and all these places, and then they conquered the North American continent between the European nations and all these. But this is Western type of worldview that we come into. We don't have an Eastern, more Buddhist worldview predominantly. The as far as what's the majority of people believe. We don't see time like those who live in Africa do. In Africa, if you say if your friend says, "Come and help me in the morning to fix my roof," and they'll say, okay, well, they show up later that evening to come and help, and you don't actually think they're late, even though you said morning, they show up in the evening because they see time differently. They see that relationship. Whereas in the West, we say, come at 9 o'clock to help me get started on my roof. If you come at 9:15, I'm upset that you're late. So you can study in missions theory and others the cultural differences. Take cultural anthropology, for instance, and that kind of give you an idea of the Western versus other worldviews. But as far as a worldview, a general worldview, we have some more Western mentality. It's very postmodern. Some will say we're even postmodern. We're kind of behind, past the postmodern, but postmodernity really bled into pluralism, which basically says there is no absolute truth. Everyone can make up their own truth, and we're finding that now it's whatever's good for you type of mentality. That's that kind of postmodern, and then even in our technology, whereas now you think of like a blog. Years ago, if someone wrote a book, that book, actually I've got one here on my desk. I'm getting ready to start reading The Fellowship of the Ring. When Tolkien wrote this book, he was the author of the book, and you didn't change his text. It's all his words. It's what he wanted to say. You couldn't go in and rip out a page and write your own for everyone to see, because you just have this one paper copy, right? But now we have blogs and we have a social media post to where multiple people can comment. So where is truth? Is truth in the original post of the original author of that blog or that Facebook post, or is truth actually found by discerning through all the comments and picking which one has the most likes? I mean, that is where we kind of sit in this kind of postmodern, very pluralistic mentality here in North America. Pluralistic really goes into a lot of things, including religions. I live here in Canada where every religion is celebrated. Christianity, though, is the one that's not as much. But if you're Muslim or Hindi or anything else, they want to celebrate you. They want you to maintain your own cultural identity and not infringe upon it. Even your sexual orientation, gender, all those type of things. And so pluralism sounds great on paper because it's nice and butterflies and whatever, but the problem is pluralism actually can't work. It can't support society because you have to actually have rules. You actually have to have standards and things set up. But if in pluralism says anything goes, any truth is valid for you as long as it makes you happy, whatever. Well, truth is different for every person, and so then there's no absolute truth. It's all subjective. It's whatever I think truth should be. Well, then I think the truth should be I can drive 200 miles per hour by a school zone. Well, the truth is a police officer is not going to let you do that, right? And so we're in this weird mix where pluralism and non-clash often. Pluralism really doesn't make sense when you dig down deep into it, but it is what people are trying to really celebrate. And very consumeristic culturally. We are a consumer culture where it is all about us, and we don't mind spending money on us, taking care of us, and even that that pluralistic and consumeristic mentality is bled into things like abortion is completely okay because I want to be able to take care of myself and consume those things that I want, and a child is going to hinder me from pursuing my own goals, and so I have the abortion, or I convince my girlfriend to have the abortion so that we can live our lives the way we want to. It's a very selfish type mentality. It all bleeds from consumerism, sadly. So that's culturally what we're talking about. And linguistically, languages in the United States, the official language is English, and in Canada it's English and French. And really, in Canada it's French mainly for the province of Quebec. So it's not the majority, it's not a 50-50. Here in Calgary, I rarely hear French spoken, but I hear a lot of other languages. But everyone should know English. English is kind of, I guess, the main trade language, if you will. So that's the focus on North America. These kind of three things kind of define for us what we mean by North America. And here's some, I guess, more ministry type reasons why we should focus on North America. Number one, we've had a decrease in cultural influence by the church. There was a time many, many decades ago where if you had the title pastor or reverend in front of your name, you were just automatically a respected person in the community. That's not the same anymore. We do not, the church does not, no longer has the same level of influence on government policy and social issues as it once had. So we've had this decrease in influence by the church. I think is because we have been very comfortable in our Christian-ish setting to where we haven't been challenged. And so now we've gotten comfy. Well, now we're being challenged by gay rights, and we're being challenged by how we're going to handle racial tension, how we're going to handle things like abortion, these other ethical type issues, artificial intelligence taking over. I mean, all these things, the church has largely remained silent because they didn't really have to say anything. But now we have to. Because we've had this decrease in cultural influence, we don't need a fight to get the church back into the government. That would be detrimental, I think, on many levels. We just need people acting like Christians. We need Christians in the church acting as Jesus would with their neighbors and their coworkers, and their friends and their family and so forth, because then we can actually permeate and get the gospel spreading organically into the hearts and lives of people, and that will be the change that will influence a change in our culture. But we've had this decrease in cultural influence by the church, so disciple having a class and a focus on disciple making, at least new churches started, new churches being planted, I think will help with this decrease in cultural influence. Another reason, number two, is there's been an increase in total population with a decrease in the church. And so this has been happening for decades and decades, but the U.S. population, the Canadian population has increased steadily, but at that same time, the church population has decreased. And so what you have, the margin in between is widening. So the U.S. population is growing, and as it's growing, the church is declining. And so we need to get to a point where that's going the other way, where as the population is increasing, the church is increasing with it, but we're actually on the decline as far as the church. That's why so many churches are closing their doors on a daily basis. Thirdly, increase in immigration from non-Christian nations. So I live here in Canada. I have a high Muslim population here, and so high Muslim and high Buddhist. And so a lot of my neighbors, actually yesterday I was at my barber shop, and my barber's from Iran, and he is Muslim, but next week we're going to go grab wings together and talk about starting an adult kind of soccer league in our community. Well, I mean, he knows I'm a Christian pastor. I know he's a Muslim, but with that increase in immigration coming from all over the world, it's also brought a mix of religious beliefs. It's brought a mix of cultural worldviews. So all these things, as they come in, that helps to increase the population. At the same time, it helps to decrease the Christian population. So you look at what percentage of the U.S. population is Christian. Well, 100 years ago, it was quite high. Now it's quite low. Fourth, increase in nuns. Now, nuns are those who just have no religious belief whatsoever, and depending on where in the United States or Canada you live, this number is anywhere from 20 to 75%. Here in Calgary, a third of Calgarians say they have no religious belief whatsoever. There are places like in New England, Boston, for instance, that's actually close to that 60, 70, almost 75% mark. And so, and Portland, Oregon, another very secular place. So there's pockets where they actually can check on the census now. You can check that you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Buddhist, you're a Hindu, you're Jewish. You check all these things, and you can also check no religion. Well, here in Calgary, 34% from the 2012 census checked no religion, and the number 2 was Islam, and number 3 was Buddhism, number 4 was Mormonism. So all these other things, and guess which is the last? It's Christianity. Well, evangelical Christianity. We have a high Catholic population, but Catholics here, I'm sure there are where you're from, for the most part, a lot of our Catholics here are not practicing Catholics, or if they're Orthodox. I've met so many here who say, oh yes, I'm Catholic, and I say, well, when's the last time you attended Mass? Oh, about a decade ago. Well, you're not really practicing your faith then, right? And so, anyways, there's been an increase in nuns, people who are leaving the faith. They're just saying, I don't want any kind of faith or any kind of religion whatsoever. And they're not necessarily atheists. I've met many here in Calgary, and even some when I lived in Winston, who had no religious beliefs whatsoever, but they weren't anti-God. They were open to the existence of God. They just didn't know how to figure out if He really was legit, if He really did exist. And so they're not always atheistic. They're not always mean about it. They just simply have no religion. That's just simply their preference. And then another focus on North America. Lastly, there these statistics on lostness. So here is just a little map. And this is just a handful of cities I want to highlight. So Piedmont is located there, and Winston-Salem, that's that W-S on the bottom right. 70%, right around 70% are unchurched and lost in the city of Winston-Salem. Actually, the Piedmont campus there near downtown Winston is actually right in the middle of the highest percentage of lostness in all of Forsyth County there at about 73%. So you see other cities here in both the U.S. and Canada. I live up in Calgary. We're 95% lost. 95% of the 1.4 million people who live in Calgary do not know who Jesus is and what He desires for their life. 95%. There are nations near the Middle East that have a higher percentage of Christians than we do. Montreal is the most unreached city on the North American continent. It's 99.5% lost. Only 0.5, half of 1% of people there claim evangelical Christianity and actually live it out. Portland sits around about 89%. Los Angeles, 90%. Salt Lake City, with its high Mormon population, is 95%. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 87%. New York City, 94%. Boston, 97.5%. So all these places, they're right in our backyard. So how could we as a school, as a university, and my dean agree that we should have a class and a minor on church planting, specifically in North America? Is for these reasons. It's for these statistics on lostness. And so I don't know where you're from, but you can. There's different ways. If you do want to find out about what the percentage of lostness is, there are like North American missiologists who have figured out how to do it through the census data, through a lot of other things, the surveying and whatnot. And so it's actually scientific data that has actually yielded these numbers. They're not just made up. But I can help you find out the best way to do that, depending on what state or province or city you live in. So what should motivate us to plant more churches in North America? I say these statistics on lostness should motivate us. It's actually what motivated my wife and I to move from Winston to Calgary. We actually were praying God take us to a place that was at least 90% lost or more, because that means there are few churches, and we were not. We were going in to compete against Satan, not against other churches, and that was never our desire. We want to work with other churches to reach our 95%. So I think these statistics should break our heart. They broke mine. I think a desire to see gospel saturation happen in your city should be one of your motivations. This desire to see every man, woman, child have an opportunity to hear, see, and respond to the gospel of Christ. We're going to talk about that in the next lecture in depth, but if you desire that, then I think you would want to see more churches planted, more disciples made. Third, I think the health of sister churches should motivate us. I think our love and concern for our neighboring churches and those who are leading those churches and the members of the churches, we should seek their good as well. And I think if we can help plant churches that are healthy, we can use those churches to help those that are struggling. You know, I'm helping in a church plant here in Calgary, and so we're experimenting with evangelism and doing different things. That's ideas that we are doing here to get lost people together, so they can hear the gospel. These creative things we're trying. Churches that in North Carolina, the rural part of North Carolina, are actually listening and asking us, oh, how can we do something like what you did? And I've actually done some Skype training with churches on how we have done some of these things, because we have to do them here as the church plant, because we don't have a building, we don't have anything. But these methods we're using are actually helping sister churches make disciples where they are too. So I think that should motivate us, that we can assist and be a blessing. I think your own story, number 4, your own story of gospel transformation should motivate you. Christ has saved you, so why would He want to save others, and how can He use you to see that happen? And I think lastly and most importantly, the motivation of simply the glory of God through worship by all people. I think that God's glory should motivate us more than anything else. He deserves to be worshipped by every person in every place. So here are some final numbers for you. The U.S. population, I actually just checked it right before this lecture, kind of get a better idea. The U.S. population right now stands right around 325 million people. And around 75%, if you kind of average out all those different numbers that we looked at, plus those that are a lot higher percentage of Christians and whatnot. But if you average everything out, it's around 75, maybe even close to 80% lost. 75 or so percent lost. That's pretty high. That means there are over 243,000 people who need Jesus just in the U.S. If you look at Canada, Canadian population is 36,800,000 right now. Let's just say January, not January, but anyways, 95% of Canada is lost without Jesus Christ. That means there are almost 35 million people who need to know Jesus Christ, because if not, they will die and they will exist in hell forever. Combine those two together, about 278 million people sitting on the North American continent do not know who Jesus is. This makes North America the third largest mission field on the planet. Let that sink in. North America, the U.S., that for 150 or so years was the largest missionary sending force on this continent, has now become the place where we actually have to send missionaries back into. There are now missionaries coming from Africa and Korea and China. I've met them, who are coming to the United States to help plant churches here, because we are now the third largest mission field. It's one of the reasons why my wife and I, as we were praying, we said, God, take us anywhere you want. As long as we just want to go to a city that needs churches, that needs disciples, that's at least 90% lost, and take us to a place where the Christians and the churches there are just heartbroken for the city, and we're willing to work together. We say, God, take us anywhere on this earth. And through some really crazy things, He led us to Calgary, Canada. He led us to our own continent. He didn't take us to the Middle East, though He could have. He didn't take us to Europe, where these percentages of 95 to 99% loss are the same over in Europe. He didn't take us there. He took us to the third largest mission field, which actually means He actually kept us in the third largest mission field. So I want you to see that when you walk out your door tonight, tomorrow, whenever, when you walk out your door and you start meeting with people, just realize that the vast majority of those that you're rubbing shoulders with do not know Jesus Christ. So that is why we're focusing on making disciples and see how that leads to church planting. So what can we do? Very simple. Not just take a class, not just get a Bible degree from Piedmont, not just get on staff at a church. What can we do? Simply obey Jesus. Make disciples. That's it. Simply go make disciples. He said, go, baptize, and teach. Live on mission, form community, see actual transformation through the Word and the Holy Spirit happen as we teach people to obey Jesus Christ. So that's simply what we can do. So this is why in this class we want to focus mainly on making disciples. We're going to draw application and examples how it relates to church planting, church revitalization, church health and growth. We're going to make those kind of applications, but we're going to focus our attention on what it means to make disciples so we can obey the Great Commission and see Jesus' fame and glory known across all the earth, especially in North America.